A very warm welcome to everyone here um, to this debate on empty classrooms. The impact of COVID on access to education and the provision of education. It gives me a great pleasure to welcome all of you here on our Zoom audience as well as those on live stream. This debate is in partnership with the Anna Lynn Foundation, and we have the President with us to introduce this topic and some of the issues. Just by way of introduction to say, amidst the many consequences of the crisis, which has actually led to multiple other crises, where not least the financial impact, is the crisis of education. We know as a result of the crisis, at its peak, some 90% of pupils were not in education. We know now that that has changed, that picture has changed somewhat, but we have regions, countries with no access. What we also know is that crisis of education or in education revealed the inequalities that the virus has already revealed in many other aspects of our lives. The richer countries were able to move into online education. 90% of richer countries were able to do that, whilst only less than 25% were able to provide from the poorer countries any access to education. We also know that in the Middle East and North Africa region, only 1 in 5 young people have access to education. That's before the crisis. So can you imagine the impact since? And I suppose the other interesting bit of data and information that reveals the wider, longer-term impact of this crisis is that every child that misses out on education has a net negative on GDP by 8%. So a minus 8% on GDP every year, every child misses out on education. Think about the knock-on impact of that, both in the short, medium and long term, especially when you think of the inequalities in current education access and provision across both EU and the Middle East and North Africa regions. So this conversation is intimately about the impact in access to education, the provision of education, but also to understand what might be done to ensure that those of you who have our program on the website will see this vivid picture of an empty classroom that represents what happened across the world. How do we make sure we do not return to that? And how do we learn the lessons to ensure that the inequalities of provision and access can be leveled upwards in a way that ensures that the economic growth, especially of the poorer countries, is not jeopardized even more so by the crisis. So, just some rules of the game in terms of how we interact before I invite our speakers in. All of you who are on Zoom, welcome. Make sure you are on mute and have your video on and your name, obviously. Those of you who want to ask a question, please do use your virtual hand. And those of you who do not know where it is, go to the participant button and there you'll find your virtual hand that you can use. I also want to extend a warm welcome to those on live stream who are watching this debate and engaging with this debate. You will also have the opportunity to engage in this conversation. Use the Twitter, hashtag Friends of Europe Debate, hashtag FOE Debate, to post your questions, queries, and comments. Also, don't forget there's a chat function for those of you on Zoom that if I'm not able to get to all of you, please do log your concerns, questions and issues in case I'm not able to get all of you in, but also have a debate amongst yourselves on the chat function too. So, without further ado, it gives me a great pleasure to welcome Elizabeth Guigou, a substantial woman who's done some incredible things in her career, is currently the president of the Anna Lynn Foundation, but has been a politician and knows her way around politics in Europe more than many people, and it gives me a great pleasure to bring you in. Elizabeth, what I would like to ask you to start with is, given I know what the Anna Lynn Foundation does in terms of supplementary and complementary education, but in that context, I would like you to set off by explaining your understanding of the wider impact of COVID on education access and provision, as you move into explain why, as a result, supplementary, complementary education becomes more important. Over to you, and a warm welcome.
Well, thank you, Mr. Kennedy. I'm very pleased to see you again. and good afternoon to all of you. Very pleased to be in line also with Minister Washisha. As you know, I'm of Moroccan origin, although I am French, and therefore it's always a pleasure for me to have discussions with, of course, Moroccan officials. So I am very happy. First, let me say that we are very happy at the Annalene Foundation that we are co-organizing again this event with Friends of Europe. The foundation, as you know, values its partnership with Friends of Europe, as both our organizations are committed to promote the Euro-Mediterranean region, its civil societies, and to put them at the core of the EU policies. I would also like to thank the ALF civil society networks for their increasing involvement in the events organized by the Foundation and Friends of Europe. And of course, I welcome here today all members of the civil society members who are participating in our meeting, and also our partners like World Bank, for example. Hello, Giulia, and many others. So, what are the main impacts on education access of the current crisis? Well, obviously, closed borders have a great impact on mobility,
Hmm.
and especially in marginalized communities or for low income families, the lack of internet access and technology tools, or the lack of know how to use these tools, have a heavy impact on education, since education programs have, since the pandemic, gone through only through digital tools. So there is a need, obviously, to increase partnership to explore more than we already do, learning solutions that integrate all students and that could continue beyond COVID 19. As you very rightly stressed, Mr. Kanani, this is a main objective to fight inequalities in education. So, in this respect, I have three main ideas that I
Great.
would like to prioritize in our discussion. First, ensuring connectivity.
Hmm.
What can we do in that respect? Second, empowering students and teachers to embrace the new educational reality. And third, of course, to ensure gender equality in education, because I fear that in the current situation, girls and young women are more
Absolutely.
fragile, maybe. So, in this regard, I have to stress that the ALF has been reinforcing its intercultural citizenship education program through the organization of face to face regional training for trainers in 2017 and in 2019. And with the outbreak of the COVID 19 pandemic, the ALF has shifted to the organization of its program uh, in a virtual exchange, and has been targeting educators in the formal and non-formal education sector. The main pedagogical resource is the ALF Educational Handbook on intercultural citizenship education in the Euro-Mediterranean region. It has been developed by the Foundation since a certain number of years, and it's involving educators from the north and the south of the region. And we are also developing an online guide for virtual exchange on intercultural learning in a post COVID world that will be given to our network of educators. Of course, we have been able to do that because we already, before the COVID-19 crisis, we already had this experience of digital education. But the aim of the capacity building program of intercultural citizenship education is the creation of a pool of multiplayers trained in the use of the ALF Foundation Education Handbook and of the use of its online guide. They also should be committed to the organization of educational activities and to the dissemination of these two pedagogical resources through a mentorship scheme that supports the trained educators in the implementation of follow-up education activities in their countries and community. So finally, I want to stress that the foundation provides support projects and initiatives uh, um, in the field of intercultural citizenship education through a call for grants, for proposals, and it is a call for proposal grant scheme. This scheme support innovative projects involving jointly civil society organizations and networks of educators from the north and the south. Um, my feeling is that the ALF activities are therefore totally in line with the digital education action plan um, developed by the EU institutions, and that, of course, these actions are all the more urgent and necessary in the context that we live in, and also all the more necessary because we have to fight inequalities in education that I fear might have increased
Indeed.
in the pandemic situation. Thanks a lot for this
Thank you.
harassment for the introduction, and I will intervene in the debate if it's
Indeed.
necessary.
Thank you very much. And it's very useful and insightful to understand the role a foundation can play of your size and your capacity to underpin and cushion some of the impact of what has taken place. And I was particularly taken by your points, particularly around the fact that, you know, we need to prioritize connectivity, make sure that it tackles inequality, but then the focus, especially in both regions, is about women and girls, who are often at the sharp end of lack of access to education or promotion of education as a social economic tool. On that note, I want to move to, so that's the role of a foundation. I want to move to government now. I want to invite Drish Washu, who is Deputy Minister of Education for Higher Education and Scientific Research in Morocco. Drish, a very warm welcome to you, and thank you for joining us here today. We've heard from a foundation leader about the role they've played. Tell us, from your perspective, you know, how have you managed the impact of COVID, both as a government, you know, in Morocco, but also what role, you know, internationally governments have played to address this issue in particular? What have been some of the obstacles or breakthroughs you've been able to develop in your management of the impact? And I suppose, whilst this is long, has the EU helped? Has there been sufficient support from the EU in its partnership with North Africa and the Middle East? Over to you, Driss, and a very warm welcome.
Thank you very much, Ramendra, and I'm pleased and honored to be on the panel with Elizabeth. I spent 20 years in a university in the Middle Atlas of Morocco, and I've always wondered what the connection was between a village and Elizabeth. The village was called Gigou, and it's right in the heart of the Middle Atlas Berber territory. So thank you for the opportunity to interact and learn from questions and participants. And I'd like to thank the Foundation and the Friends of Europe for the opportunity. If I may, I thought maybe to answer the question, to take you a little bit through our experience, which is representative of the Southern Mediterranean, We may have done slightly better than some countries in Africa or south of the Mediterranean, and others may have done better than us. But I think the experience is rich. So the COVID-19 brought out the best in Moroccan universities, from solidarity to collaboration, to lowering resistance to the new, to grappling with the unknown, and using whatever technology one can get, the course content to students, wherever they may be, in the confinement of their homes. We are now 120,000 content items richer. Some faculty have gotten better at using Moodle, Google Classroom, or Microsoft Teams to interact with their students, but the overwhelming majority have improved their radio and television presenting and broadcasting abilities. Most syllabi have been covered, and faculty are using whatever technology they feel comfortable with to review their course curricula. Time then came for preparation for final exams. And this is when more and more student voices were coming out, complaining that the connection was too slow, too sporadic, or faulty when needed. Some even complained that the one computer in the family was shared by the other siblings and was not always accessible. The same siblings disagreed on what to watch on family TV when an important lecture for one of them was broadcast. We suddenly realized that equity and equal opportunity are issues that cannot be overlooked, that the process should not exacerbate the digital divide already in existence. The underprivileged would be left farther behind. We came to the conclusion that fairness required not to assess the learning that might have taken place from distance teaching. Having by and large covered over 70% of the curricula by March 16th, when we stopped teaching face-to-face, so the university presidents agreed with the ministry to decide students' admission to higher levels based solely on material covered until then. In our quest for how to keep the motivation of the faculty who had invested so much effort and time in content development, we agreed to use the accumulated material for review at the beginning of the academic year and for support in subsequent semesters. We also concluded that we absolutely needed to invest in the hardware and software so that all students have equal access to technology. All of this would not yield the desired outcomes if we did not invest in capacity building for the teaching staff. The 12 public universities undertook an evaluation of their experience with distance education, collecting input from both faculty and students. And in a report from the Rabat University, the oldest modern university of the country, 4 observations stood out. Number one, of the students surveyed, 29% were not satisfied with the experience. 2, while 72% of the faculty confirmed they had never used distance education before, 8 out of 10 are convinced of the usefulness of blended learning and teaching. 3, 87% intend to use distance delivery in the future. 4, and perhaps most importantly, 75% would like training and support with further efforts in distance education. So crisis and challenge, but also an opportunity. So the main goal today, in addition to equal access opportunity, is to get the faculty to a level where they master the technology well enough to move from lecturing on radio and television to teaching online. Interaction with students and monitoring their learning would contribute to important pedagogical changes, moving substantially from faculty-centered to student-centered approaches. Ultimately, this would contribute to sowing more seeds of critical thinking development and lifelong learning practices for both teachers and learners. The impact on international and intercultural education is even more challenging. Due to travel restrictions, as Elizabeth said, alleviated according to COVID-19 pandemic situation on students' mobility and international exchange programs that allowed students to discover, among others, the culture and language of their host country. As an example, 126 Moroccan students living in Wuhan were brought home on February the 2nd. By the end of 2019-2020 academic year, more than 1,000 Moroccan students in China returned to the kingdom. About 400 students moving between Morocco and Tunisia, including 233 Moroccans and 165 Tunisians, found themselves far from their country of study. End-of-year exams were ensured remotely in their home country. For the 2020 and 2021 academic year, we estimate that the number of international students newly admitted to Moroccan universities will not exceed 2,000, knowing that the Moroccan offer includes more than 5,000 new free educational places with many advantages. So only 40% are expected to show up. A lot of students stranded here in Morocco were given campus housing and were able to follow their courses remotely. In this regard, harnessing the potential of digital technology has been one of the alternative solutions to ensure the continuation of mobility programs and for students intercultural experience. Morocco maintains its educational offer intended for international students for 2021 academic year while adapting it to current epidemiological circumstances and capitalizing on the experience acquired during the previous year. To this end, two teaching options are offered to international students: a face-to-face education for those admitted to engineering, medical, and business school and business institutions where the numbers are small and we can ensure health safety. A distance education for students in open access institutions that already have the necessary digital platforms provided with educational content and have multiple possibilities for interaction between the institutes and the students wherever they are. So a blended alternative for large class sizes, distance, and for small class sizes, face-to-face. There are, however, challenges to overcome. Some students without reliable internet, as Elizabeth said, without access and/or technology, struggle to participate in digital learning. Mm-hmm. This gap is seen across countries and between income brackets within countries. For example, while 95% of students in Switzerland, Norway, and Austria have a computer to use for their schoolwork, only 34% in Indonesia and about 45-50% in Morocco. These new learning methods have made face-to-face contact and interaction between students harder than it was, which makes social and cultural exchanges impossible in these hard times. But as we all know by now, these new technologies that we have turned to have become more effective in terms of learning and gaining knowledge. In fact, it has made students communicate differently. Virtual friendships, acquaintances, distance does not matter as much since students can communicate with each other and reach distant places. It has also developed new skills that are useful for life, such as the autonomy of learning, self-teaching, discovery learning, socialization through group chats and virtual friends. To what extent can the latter replace the face-to-face experience, the living together, the behavior observation and modification, and the cultural immersion remains to be seen. Many efforts are needed in that direction. So to sum up, I think we need to look into social responsibility of telecom providers to make it easy and accessible for students to get connected and to get equipment. We need to find donors and people with a stronger social responsibility to help with equipment for our students and the connection. And my final thought, the help we got from Europe, the British Council and the BBC helped us with radio courses in English, helped with television courses, and helped with digital library that was freely accessible to all of our university students. The Association of Francophone Universities helped us with developing 13 units, 12 for students to manipulate the equipment and to be introduced to distance learning and take best advantages of it through personal development, through the soft skills, study skills, and with a unit for faculty to develop distance teaching materials that we're to use now as we launch the school year. So we're very grateful for the support, for the understanding, and we're also grateful for the opportunity to maybe achieve a qualitative jump in the use of technology while we have a lower resistance level from faculty and staff. And I'll be happy to take questions and interact with the audience. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was fulsome and explained a lot. I like the way you went from, the actual initial impact and the kind of steps you took. And I think it's interesting that some of the support and infrastructure you receive from through the British Council, the BBC, is quite telling, as well as the Francophone University Network, about how alternative forms of diplomacy can actually reap benefit rather than the usual channels. But one would hope that as you move forward, that the usual diplomatic channels can be more effective to ensure that the partnership and support from richer countries can add value and be socially responsible, as you say, for the poorer countries. But I was taken by your point about telecommunications companies and how to urge them to be more socially responsible. I think that's going to be an issue that we should take back and think about in terms of how does that happen, because we know bandwidth is poor, we know access is poor, but actually can be easily transformed if the bottom line is not just a profit line, that it's a socially responsible bottom line too. So on that note, I want you colleagues on Zoom and on live stream, please react to what you've heard. We have a lot of students and teachers in the audience. I will be bringing in a couple of teachers to give their direct right-hand experience, ground experience of the impact. But I invite you, those of you who've been listening intently, to post a comment or raise your hand and ask a question. Do we have any people out there who would like to raise an issue? Don't be shy. Please engage. It's a great opportunity.
Yes, please. I rose my hand.
Lassen. Is this Lassen?
Yes. Yes, exactly.
A very warm welcome. You are based in Morocco, is that right?
Yes, that's right.
Welcome. Just introduce yourself a little bit and what your question is or comment.
Okay, thank you very much. So my name is Lassen Giulia. I am an inspector of secondary education in Morocco, in Agadir. And I have two comments, if you don't mind, and a question for His Excellency, the Minister Idriss Awisha. So first of all, I would like to greet him, to greet His Excellency Idriss Awisha, and to greet Elizabeth you, of course. So thank you very much for your presentations. And two comments to start with. I think, as they say in English, there's always, in every cloud, there is a silver lining. I would like to highlight the positive aspect instead of just talking about the problems. I think this situation of the COVID-19, although it has raised issues of inequalities and the problem of connection and access to the internet, etc., it has also brought to light values of solidarity and leadership. In Morocco, since the beginning of the lockdown, what we saw at the level of leadership in the Ministry of Education is a very interesting leadership example where the ministry has led this distance education, did not wait, and piloted distance education and started to create digital materials. And this went to the regional level, to the provincial level, and we saw a lot of teachers who have volunteered to actually record lessons and put them on the platforms and contribute to this national project of providing the digital resources, which are now available on national TV channels and also on TV's website. So these values are very important. And I would like to tell you a little bit from my perspective as a supervisor, because I work with teachers. Yesterday we had a meeting, and something interesting is the positive thing that now this situation is bringing to how we see teaching. Yesterday we talked about flipped learning, because nowadays in Morocco we do what we call the alternation. 50% in class and 50% is given as a homework. So the teachers, they have to teach 50% in class, and they have to give resources to the students to do at home. So the flipped learning model, which not long time ago was a dream for us, is now a reality. Teachers start to say, yes, we can apply it. Now we have an opportunity. Students are at home 50% of the time, so we can actually do this. And teachers are becoming more and more motivated to use the technology, to use digital devices, and so on. This is good. This is positive. Before I finish, I'd like to just add two things that I think.
But be brief, please. Be brief. We have many other people who want to come in. Go on.
Of the students, because in Morocco, we have reduced the numbers of the students to 50% of the students studying one day, and the next day the other 50%, which means less students in the classroom, 18 to 20, which is good. The second thing is the parents' concern about the school. Now, some of the worries that, and here I move to the question, my last comment, which is a question to His Excellency Minister Giulia, is the teachers, they display a lot of fear and anxiety about the future. They don't know where the situation is going. They don't know what is going to happen in the second semester. The other thing is the need for training. I would like to ask His Excellency, is there a program now within the COVID situation to provide in-service training for the teachers, to provide professional development, additional professional development for the teachers, not only to improve their teaching skills, but also to make them feel psychologically at ease with teaching?
Great point.
Are there any project? Because most of the time we talk about providing access, providing schooling, etc., and we forget the teachers who are the main elements in all of this. Psychological and the pedagogical aspect is very, very important. Is there a scheme in that regard?
Okay. Lassen, thank you. I really welcome your contribution. Driss, you clearly have a fan out there in the education system. But thank you also. I know it's been really helpful to hear that from the ground up about the impact and the positive. And I like the way you turned it on its head, that it has, unlike in certain parts of Europe, the sense of solidarity has come about, which we've seen in parts of Europe, but not sometimes it took a longer time in political terms for that to happen. But I think this question that you raise has an implication for both what a foundation can do to support the efforts of government, but also I'll bring Driss in to answer that very specific question. But I want to bring in three other people who've been very patient before I do come back to both of you. So if you note those questions for me. Ashraf, are you there? You had your hand up?
Yes. Hello, everyone.
I can sort of hear you.
Hello, everyone.
Hello.
How are you doing?
Very well. There you go. Tell us, introduce yourself and tell us where you are and your question. Can you hear me, Ashraf? Please, start.
I'm a student in Chad University in Morocco, of course. So while I am a student this year, of course, I experienced the online learning, and of course, we really face a lot of problems along with the lack of materials. Of course, we faced that we didn't have enough training, or we didn't have a solid training to use the technology.
Okay. We're having real problems hearing you properly. There's a bit of an echo. But is your point about support to you in terms of materials and the kind of support and training that you might need also as a student?
Yes, exactly.
Okay, got that. Thank you for... Go on.
Thank you so much.
No, Ashraf, thank you for joining us. And sorry that we couldn't hear you that well. Joseline, let me move to her. Let me move to you. Joseline?
Yes, please.
Hello, welcome.
Hello, thank you.
Tell us where you are and introduce yourself and then your question, please.
Yes, I'm in Germany. and I'm a student at the Technical University, Chemnitz. And I'm also a founder of a children's organization in Uganda that is supporting orphans in Uganda.
Oh, lovely.
And I have really liked the presentation of Mr. Owi,
Washa, yes,
and
yes.
from Elizabeth, and especially how you have concluded it, because I can present from different points of views. First of all, from the point of view of Europe as a student who has been also affected by COVID, but also on the view of Africa. I originate from Uganda, as a view of Africa who is also dealing with education institutions or organizations in Uganda. So, Mr. Owi,
Yes,
sorry,
that's okay. Don't worry. Carry on.
Pronunciation, yes. So my worry is I would like to also learn from you, because you have really explained how the high institutions in Morocco have done great or have done well during this time when you're talking about technology. But I would like to, is there also something you have done concerning primary or secondary education?
Okay.
This COVID has not only brought differences in one way, but it has brought masses of differences from countries to countries, from villages to villages, from families to families. And if I talk on the point of Uganda, you will find that like students or kids in the villages, for example, don't have even a TV in the home. So
Indeed.
And in Uganda, they talked about bringing, for example, lectures on the TV, on the radios, but these families do not have even access to such things. You know, these are like unthinkable things for villages. So maybe if you can also, I would like to also learn from you how you have managed with especially primary and secondary education students, and especially in deep villages.
Okay, excellent. Jocelyn, thank you for raising that point. And I think the essential thing is, how do countries learn from each other and support each other within Africa? I think is a key one. And the vast differentials in reality from a village to an urban place, and the access that means for young people and children in particular. I want to now finally go to Nihad before I bring in our two contributors to respond to some of the issues. Nihad, are you there?
Yes. Hello. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. A warm welcome to you.
Hello?
Hello, can you hear me?
All right. Yes, I can hear you.
Introduce yourself
So
and your
my
question.
name is Wultali Nihad. I'm from Algeria. I represent Jazair Al Khair. So you all were speaking about changing the whole education into an online education, but like we have to put in mind that like we don't have the same connection as Europe does. Some of families doesn't even have an online. They don't even have Wi-Fi at home. They don't have a computer. They don't have any resources that they may help them. So we have to put that into consideration before stepping forward toward that direction.
Thank you for coming online again. Thank you very much for your question. Again, reinforcing the point made by Jocelyn about the differentials of access more broadly. So very briefly, if I could ask Elizabeth and Driss. Driss, if I could kick off with you, but I need you to be brief in your responses so that we can move on to inviting some of the teachers that we've got piped up, but also the report from the World Bank that can set out some kind of key areas that we need to focus on. Driss, over to you first.
Well,
if I can start with the last question, and I'm not in charge of primary and secondary education, but what my colleagues have done is use television and radio to make up for the missing opportunity for internet connection. Television covers 90% of the territory, and radio is present everywhere. So I think that's what helped to make up for the internet deficiency. As for training the teachers, we are working with the Francophone Association of Universities. They've developed the 13 units that I said, and starting in 2 weeks' time, we will begin training the trainer. So the model given to the faculty with the multiplying effect, then they would go and train in their universities. So these are the two quick answers.
Thank you very much. Elizabeth?
Well, yes, thank you. Of course, thanks to Dries for this very, very interesting overview of what is happening in Morocco. I'm very happy with that. I think that Lassen was right in stressing the positive aspects of the opportunities that can come out of this crisis. This is very true because we are compelled to improve the use of digital devices and to improve the use of these devices in education, primary education, civil society education, and of course, training of trainers. But we must not forget, like Nihad stressed only a minute ago, that there are a certain number of communities of low-income families that do not have the access, not only the technical access, but they do not know how to use these new devices. Of course, television can help, and Dries is right in stressing that, but it's not, as interactive as, of course, the web use. And therefore, we have in France, which is my country, we very well know that there have been people and families that have been kept out of the use of education during this lockdown. And there have been even teachers, elder ones, who were not at ease with the use of web facilities. Therefore, we must never forget that we should act not only with people who are already included in our web communities, but also and mainly, of course, and in priority with people who are still, unfortunately, excluded.
Absolutely. I think both the foundation and governments, I think, have an important role to play to raise that issue consistently with politicians, but also governments, and also, I think, in particular, the telecommunications industry, because I think the role of that industry becomes very, very significant as we think about the impact across Africa in particular. I want to invite now Giulia Mareskini, who has been one of the authors of, you're from the Center for Integration in Mediterranean and also with the World Bank. You've come out with a report recently about the impact on what's it called? I think the internationalization of tertiary education and the impact of COVID on it. Can I turn to you first to just set out what you think are the key points that we need to take into account? Giulia.
Okay, thank you very much for giving the floor. So I'm very pleased to be here with you. Thank you very much for the invitation. I would like to thank President Guigou for inviting me and the Minister to having me as well. So I'm part of the Center for Mediterranean Integration and I work also at the World Bank. And we just produced a report on internationalization of tertiary education, which could be, which looks at the tertiary education level and does draw some interesting conclusion on COVID that we can analyze quickly. So I would like to present the context, what it is internationalization, this unpronounceable name.
I know.
I'm having trouble every time as well as I pronounce it. Second, I would like to say what this report attempts to do. And third, let's see how, in this context, the COVID-19 crisis can be seen as an opportunity, actually. So the pandemic or COVID did hit seriously also tertiary education. And this is not only on the fact that it touched all the students almost, but it also had impact on internationalization of tertiary education because international students have been stranded in both home and host country. They have actually lifted all the restrictions, and they will actually, this crisis is reducing student mobility and will reduce student mobility going forward for the next months and for the next maybe year. But what it is internationalization exactly? So internationalization is the fact of integrating an international or intercultural dimension. So on the intercultural, I know Madame Guigou did underline how important is the role of the Anna Lindh Foundation on this. So the idea is to integrate those dimensions in post-secondary education with a double objective. The first one is to enhance the quality of education itself, and the second one is to make a meaningful contribution to the society as a whole, because internationalization is a way to open up to other cultures, and so in this way is a way to develop critical thinking notably. Internationalization is a very broad concept. It's not limited to mobility. Mobility of students and staff, teacher, etc., is the most common one, the one we have been used to refer to most commonly. But actually, is much more than this. It is also mobility of programs, so mobility of knowledge in itself. It's academic partnership, and it is also what we call internationalization at home. So all the activity and set of activities that can be done at home, so do not need any mobility, any physical mobility from staff and teachers. So this could be internationalization of the curriculum, virtual mobility, what we are doing right now, actually, collaborative online international learning, and intercultural activity.
Okay.
So what this report does, this report looks at the internationalization in the Middle East and North Africa region. And it is actually the first report that is dedicated to this topic for the MENA region. So its objective is to raise awareness on this subject, and actually to stimulate regional policy dialogue on the topic. Why? Because it is really much needed, this dialogue, because MENA, this region, Middle East and North Africa, shows a very limited attractiveness for international partnership. Today, the MENA region is the least prioritized region by tertiary education institutions around the world for developing partnerships. So the institutions themselves, they do not prioritize at all the MENA region as the one with which they would like to have this kind of partnership and exchange. So this report, first of all, it presents key global trends in internationalization, and presents what are the benefits for students and institutions from the economic to the socio-political aspects.
Okay.
I'm not detailing. It provides an overview of the status of internationalization in the region. It focuses mainly on student mobility only because there are the data available are on student mobility, but it really present all the other dimensions, and in particular is international at home, and it gives recommendations. So, but why the COVID is important here? Because actually we saw that the MENA region is actually lagging a little bit behind on this internationalization, and the COVID crisis can represent an opportunity for the MENA region in order for this region to catch up with the other region on the internationalization agenda. Why? Because also the other region in the world today, they are moving to activities that are linked with what I defined as internationalization at home. So all those activities that are related with internationalization, but can be done at home. And for this, there are, for example, the online learning. So this is important.
I need you to conclude, because I'm running out of time. Giulia, I would like you to cut to the chase. I know you are. Yeah, go on.
Yes, so this is important because this can bring skill gains, employability, and also internationalization at home is at lower cost of implementation and
Sure.
has a wider reach than the normal physical mobility. So on this case, for tertiary education or internationalization, the COVID is an opportunity for this region. And so this is why it's important to talk about it. Thank you very much for giving the floor.
No, Giulia, thank you very much. But there's a kind of sense in me that says, we know that, right? And then so what happens? So I think one of the things, when we hear about the divergences and the inequalities, it would be interesting to know, and you can put this on the chat. I won't bring you back because I really want to bring in another teacher from another area. But, you know, and so what? What happens to the recommendations, and who's going to listen to that, and where will it go? Will the World Bank use this as an opportunity to think about its own financing, of the importance of not bringing forward the inequalities that you've outlined for the MENA region in particular? So if you can put your mind to some of that on the chat function, I think we would all find that really helpful, because ultimately talking about it is important, raising awareness is important, but action is even more important given the qualitative impact on inequalities that we've seen in terms of access to education and quality education, in that when we know that the digital infrastructure does not provide that opportunity. I want to bring in Rolanda. Rolanda, you've been patient, from Lithuania. Are you there? Hello? You need to unmute. Hello?
Yes. Hello.
Hello. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, it's nice to meet you all. I was not going to say anything, but yeah, but it's okay. If I've got the floor, I would like to say that somehow we should pay attention more to those good things, because in Lithuania, for instance, families probably for the first time in their life had so much time together.
Indeed.
That they had learned how to be together. And suddenly we all realized how many new problems appeared inside families, and how much help families need in psychological terms, in you know, I think this period for all of us opened a lot of opportunities for our creativity. And in this case, creativity is the main thing, because before we were talking so much to be creativity. Now we were like forced a little bit, but we suddenly realized how much we have inside, and how much we can do together really with so little money. Because before, even organizations, they were talking so much about, oh, we haven't money, it's lack of money. And now we just need computer. I understand that there are countries which haven't computer. It's another problems. But for instance, in Lithuania, there are so many space for opportunity, for new ideas. Young people, they are amazing how they are good with all those technology things. They even didn't understand and didn't know themselves how much power they have inside. And I think it's the time for all of us to learn and to share from young people, how can we use that in education. Of course, it's absolutely challenge for teachers who are saying that we are becoming crazy just because we don't know what is waiting for us.
Indeed, yes.
And when they are preparing for the lessons, they are thinking not about pupils, but parents as well, because parents can participate in lessons also. So it's a new time for us. I think we will never return to the same situation we were before. So just open our minds, and we haven't another, it's our new time, I think.
Thank you. I love your optimism and your injection of the art of the possible, especially also this notion of those who are fortunate to have families is to discover what familyness means, and that sense of creativity between old and young, and the fact that suddenly you realize that you don't need money. And sometimes it is, and that's rich to say when we're talking about people in total poverty in parts of Africa, but there's something about something that we can learn through this to turn this crisis on its head in terms of opportunities, which can be quite simple, and that sense of connection, human connection that's achieved. I want to bring in the last, we've only got about 4 or 5 minutes left now. Nadia.
Thank you so much, Nadia. I'm living in Cork, in Ireland. I'm a youth and community worker. I understand Rolanda, and I have to say that we needed here in Ireland to react at the start instead of just, there was no time to take it in or think about it. So we did react even in the informal education sector, and there was no time to think around. But there was a lot of challenges for young people, for families and for practitioners, be it in the rural or the urban spaces, if they had computer, not computer. And I think this is the COVID brought, if the COVID brought anything good, is actually to brought consciousness around the fact that we become more aware of what other countries are suffering on a daily basis. We were able to see it hands-on. And I think that was a good thing. It shows as well our limitations when it comes to access, not only access to the internet, but as well our knowledge around technology. And that as well, we had to struggle through it and try to be on the other side, learn from the people who had the good practice. But altogether, I think that this experience that we are on, it is ongoing. It showed even more the differences between areas in a country, in a village.
If I can,
anywhere.
because I'm running out of time, but it would be useful to know if there was one thing, and this is a really challenging question, and this is a question to all of you, because talking about this is important. Doing something about it is even more important. So I'd like to know from you, I mean, you've just spoken, what if there was one thing you'd want to say to a policymaker or a funder, what would it be, Nadia?
Yeah, it's definitely to make sure that the people who don't have the means, that they have access to technology. And this is not only for universities, and I understand that universities are kind of have the link all over the world, and they can actually, but it's actually for primary schools and secondary schools. This is the future. Those young people are suffering mentally as well.
Thank you for raising that point of the lower end of the scale. I mean, by age, that primary education is absolutely key. Nage, I'm going to you're the last one I'm going to bring in before I go back to our contributors. You've been very patient. I hope I pronounced your name correctly.
Yes, thank you very much for your invitation. It's correctly. Quickly, the crisis of COVID encouraged Egypt government and the NGOs to take quick steps for using the technology. Now in Egypt, we launch a great or a huge project for using the digital materials for subjects, and in high school now from first year to third year, we're using the tablets for studying and teaching the subject for the students and examining them already. This year we will using the schools for the activities only for 2 days, and the students can get their knowledge from the channels of the Ministry of Education. This is a wonderful opportunities for us for using the technology and support the teachers in the schools.
Okay. So I'm running out of time, but tell me, let me ask you the same question, Nage, if you're still with me. What's that one thing you'd like to ask of a policymaker or a funder? If you had the chance to tell me now, what would that be?
I will ask them for give the opportunities for the teachers for connection physically as soon as in the future.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for joining us from Egypt. Thank you very much. So, colleagues, we're about just out of time. So I'm going to ask both our contributors, and I'll come and thank you all in a minute, but if I just ask Elizabeth firstly, just a kind of a 60-second response to what you've heard and what you might do with what you've heard.
Well, thank you for all participants to have stressed the opportunities and to, with an optimistic view about that we can have opportunities. But my main remark will be that although we have to promote connectivity and to include more people and to use these tools for internationalization, which is a very good thing, like as Giulia has stressed, we should not forget that physical mobility is really very important, because I would not like this period, with with closed borders to be indefinite. I think that if that was the case, there would be a real risk that each group or each family should close on itself, forgetting the necessity to open their views and to open to other people. So beware that there are opportunities for internationalization, that's true, but we should not forget physical mobility.
Noted.
And both are complementary, of course.
Thank you very much. Dries.
Just along the same lines, but responding to an earlier question about elementary school students, a survey was done at the beginning of this year with parents, whether they would like to have their kids study remotely or face-to-face, and 80% preferred face-to-face. So I think for the interaction, the socialization, the learning, but also to be able to go to work and somebody else is taking care of the kids usefully and in a learning environment. My last thought is, I think it came across that we needed to invest more in equipment, in connectivity, and in training, both for faculty and students. And this can be very expensive, which it is for us, with calculated, and the government at present is looking for resources. But this brings to mind a quote by the former president of the United States, President Obama, who once said, if you think the cost of education is too expensive, wait, or if you think it's too high, wait until you see the cost of ignorance.
Yes.
So I think it's worthwhile to invest in education. It's probably the best investment one can make.
Indeed, and thank you, Dries. I hope that some of these points and issues that have been raised, that both of you will take up in different fora, and not least as a minister, the network of ministers that are around you. It's about how do you promote the good practice, but how do you create strength in numbers to, I suppose, convince telecommunication companies and governments to become more socially responsible, to create the infrastructure you need. I hope that that's one of the things that you can work on and push forward if you're not working on it already. But it seems obvious when you think about the different perspectives we've heard from parts of the MENA region. I want to thank both of you, but most importantly, these debates only come alive by you as Zoom participants and those on the live stream. I want to thank you all for joining us and being with us. And we will be continuing this debate over the months and years to come, because this isn't going to go away. But one of the things that, as you said, Dries, that when you look at the facts and figures, robbing a child of education now robs a nation's economic potential in the future. And I think we must not lose sight of that. Thank you all for being with us. Be safe. Mind your distance, and look forward to seeing you again on one of our debates. Tomorrow, we have a major debate, a Debating Africa session in the afternoon. If those of you wish to attend, it's going to be on the rule of law and migration and mobility. So you are more than welcome to join us in different ways, but that will be a big one. We have a number of commissioners from the EU and the African Union. So take the opportunity to join and engage. Take care, thank you, and see you again very, very shortly. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Darren.
Thank you,
Elizabeth.
Thank you very much.
See you in Vigo.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you very much.